how to set up a frontal film. This is Dr. Collins with the Advanced Orthogonal Institute, and let's get into it. Again, we are leaning on the old neck doc videos for x-ray setup. These are great videos. You should go back and check them out. But when we're talking about the frontal film, a few things to review. One is, what structures are we going to be needing to visualize on this film, right? How do we set it up? How do we set up a frontal film properly? How do you evaluate if the frontal film x-ray that you capture is acceptable, or if you need to do another one? And then how do we troubleshoot particularly rotation in a patient, right? If you're getting too much rotation, and also if you have a hyperkyphotic patient, right? So they're in that hyperkyphosis, right? How do you adapt your film to make sure that you're able to capture what you need to? I wanted to lean on this first part here. I thought it was really good with the anatomy. Your mastoid process, your posterior arch, especially that inferior aspect, the atlas transverse process, your axis C2 spinous, the nasal cavity and nasal septum, the ocular orbit, your occipital condyles, the zygomatic arch, your lateral masses, and your odontoid. Even these C7 bodies, you need to have these all visualized so that you can mark them properly to analyze your frontal. Setting up your frontal... Truth. Okay, so all of those structures you really need to be able to see clearly so you can mark them when it comes time for your analysis, right? If you cannot make out, especially when you're talking about the condyles or the atlas, really everything mentioned, you're going to have a hard time getting accuracy. So if you need to adjust your settings, KVP, MAS, or potentially how you're setting them up, if you need to adapt to an S2 at 10 film, which is an advanced orthogonal trick. So next, let's get into particularly how to set up a frontal film the right way. And I'll kind of toggle over here. Your frontal film is going to be based on the sagittal film you took, right? You need to be able to take on the S line that you measure, meaning what is my nasal structure? And we went through this in the other frontal film analysis video, right? But I'm on an S0, S1, S2, S3, S4, right? Where am I sending that collimator light through? And then what angle is the atlas plane on that sagittal film? And that will show me how to set up the tube and bucky. Let's see here, right? So we get our tube set up on the appropriate angle based on that S line. And then we're going to make sure that we are shooting, well, accommodate the bucky for the patient, of course. Right? Good trick is always to say, you may feel it touching your shoulders, but don't lean back. Go ahead and hold yourself up. But I'm shooting through that facial feature and then making sure my string, right, that string is going to give me the proper distance. And advanced orthogonal, you're taking everybody at 46, all of our views. And then I've got from tube to bucky where that collimator light is hitting that horizontal line. And so I know if I'm going through that facial feature, let's say it's an S2, right, at 10 degrees, I'm going right through that bridge of the nose on that 10-degree angle. And then from there, let's talk about rotation. Rotation's probably the most critical troubleshooting that you're going to hit on a frontal film. If your skull is not perfectly balanced in terms of rotation, right? Like you really have no business measuring that frontal film. It's not going to be acceptable. So you need to make sure that the ocular orbits and the side of the skull have equal distances right and left. That's something that you're looking for as you're standing in the plane of the tube to bucky. and I'm looking at that patient, right? I have them in front of me, and I'm even visually looking for that, ocular orbit side of skull. And then when I go to take my film, if I'm noticing they're a little too rotated right or left, I'm coming back and then correcting that for that second frontal film to get that rotation out. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So you are looking at that distance. You want to see that where the ocular orbit inside of the skull measurement is as close to equal as possible. Because if not, you're rotated, right? Are you really going to get an acceptable film to measure? No. So if we go back to our patient here, right? Again, we're looking to correct that slight bit of rotation, very subtle, but then you're going to shoot back around the wall and redo that film until they are perfect. And then you have no rotation, no error in your measurement. Also, worth mentioning, you'll have those nasal structures as secondary references, so you can go the lateral mass to the nasal structures. This is going to be a far second to those ocular orbits, though, along with the mastoids running through the jawline. You'll see those mastoid processes, right? Is that jawline intersecting with that mastoid? Or is the jaw hanging out, is there clearly rotation where the jaw is hanging out or the mastoid is hanging out, more asymmetrical? All right, so let's also talk about the posterior arch. You want a neutral posterior arch. This is one of those, do I have an acceptable film? If you have them smiling or frowning, then maybe you captured the S line wrong, but you want to see that neutral posterior arch. That's going to be huge on orthogonal films. All right, next thing is going to be the S2 at 10, which I referenced. When you start to have a relationship that is more than 20 degrees different in terms of the tube, you see me doing it here, tube and then the Bucky angle, you can start to get a blown out cervical spine at the bottom. It can get real fuzzy and really hard to measure. So one of the things that advanced orthogonal will prescribe is take a film with a camera angle of 10 degrees through the S2. So let's say you're getting an S3 at 20 or 25 and your Bucky angle is already at a 10, and now you're at 35 degrees disparity between the tube and the Bucky, right? So the way that you can help navigate this so all of your film is not blown out, meaning the cervical spine, the skull is all stretched out, the jaw is over on top of all of your structures. You know what I'm talking about if you've taken one of these. Take an S2 at 10 as a supplementary view to capture and analyze. But again, you're going to go through the S2, meaning the bridge of the nose, at 10 degrees. Let's see here. And you're going to get just those really clean lateral margins of your C7 when you go to do that C7 body. Real clean like that versus blown out and stretched out. And all of your structures, whether it's your posterior arch that you're trying to measure. All right, lastly, let's talk hyperkyphosis. One of the tricks you can do with advanced orthogonal is actually lean your patient back when they're hyperkyphotic like that. So instead of continuing to get more and more angle on the Bucky, which again is going to blow out your film, right? Keep that angle more shallow and instead bring the patient back, right? Bring them back so that head and back are now coming to a more shallow angle, and find that sweet spot where you can match them up and take some of that angle off of your Bucky, right? So adjusting for hyperkyphosis. Let's talk annual conference, November 2nd and 3rd. It's going to be amazing. I know it sounds like it's a while away, but it's not. It's going to be here quick. So this is your homecoming, right? We're going to be talking advanced imaging CBCT of the craniocervical junction. Going to have a lot of really cool stuff. So if you haven't been to an AdvO seminar in a while, you're practicing doctor, this is your homecoming. Come hang out, come brush up, get sharp. You're going to learn a lot, like you can see here real quick. If you're a student, if you're a practicing doctor that isn't as familiar with AdvO and you'd like to jump in and kind of see without maybe a boot camp's a little too intensive, right? This is the thing to be at. Take the time, spend a couple bucks, come spend time with us and really dig into advanced orthogonal, meet the various board members, the other docs who practice. And I think you're going to just find out how awesome of a group this is. And we got big things on the horizon. So hope to see you there. I will be there for the annual conference. But other than that, thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment. Shoot us a message if you have any questions. But God bless.